if someone came to you, and I suspect maybe some have, a Muslim comes and says, how should I make sense of what happened on October 7th? On the one hand, obviously, Palestinians were under a condition of very severe repression, in Gaza in particular. And yet this was an attack that also seems to have not just take against soldiers, but have targeted civilians for killing and for abduction. From a perspective of kind of Muslim ethics of war, how do you make sense of what happened on October 7th?
Well, I mean, any student of Muslim law would know that it is strictly prohibited to target civilians. But again, I mean, that's the thing about theology is that uh, and dealing with God's law is that human beings have an amazing capacity to justify whatever they want to justify, whether it's arguments of necessity or which is often how religious law gets skewed and gets corrupted. But what I'm how to make sense of it, the way I I understand it, and again, I should put into a caveat is that I've learned again from a long history of practice in the human rights field is that it is very dangerous to draw conclusions until you've had an opportunity for people to actually research the facts. So, I mean, I just want to put this disclaimer in that I still want objective investigation of what happened precisely and who the victims were and what atrocities and violations were committed. Because they're all sides are claiming uh, uh, all types of things and are heavily charged. But I do, I mean, the evidence, uh, the, there seems to be sufficient evidence that civilians were targeted, civilians were hurt, and that violations were committed. And that's, of course, morally and theologically a huge problem. And the the way I understand it is not just the fact of a prolonged repression and that I mean it has become so regular to hear every week of uh, shootings and arrests and brutalization of this population under occupation. But my guess is that the leadership at Hamas uh, clearly read the trajectory of things that they were becoming uh, not just marginalized, but they were sort of disappearing from the from the radar. That um, Saudi Arabia was getting ready to sign an accord with Israel. It looked like Saudi Arabia was everyone was basically rushing to the table to make peace with Israel and ignore Palestinians and ignore everything they had affirmed to that point that we will not make peace with Israel unless Israel gives Palestinians even a measure of their rights or even the rights that Israel had committed to under the Oslo Accords. It was quite clear that the uh, Morocco and Bahrain and the Emirates and Sudan and so on had all abandoned this position. Um, and I think that the the U.S. administration had taken that very dangerous step of recognizing Jerusalem as uh, all of Jerusalem as belonging to Israel and as Israel's capital, and sort of basically leaving nothing on the table for. And Palestinians were basically looking at a history of being doomed to oblivion, being doomed to living in this open air prison in Gaza, while they are a priority on no one's table. And I think that, um, and I should add another thing from a Muslim's perspective, that Muslims who cared were constantly, um, it's not an exaggeration to say that your senses was being assaulted and regularly offended by the offenses being committed against the Aqsa Mosque. That this was pretty much a weekly thing, that now it had become a regular occurrence for Israeli security to accompany militants uh, who are treated very differently in Israel that than militants would be treated anywhere else, accompanied in violating the sanctity of the Aqsa Mosque, and these repeated offenses and the heightened anxiety that we are coming close to the time that the Aqsa Mosque is going to actually have the fate of the mosque in Khalil, where the time is divided between Jews and Muslims and so on. Um, and I think that the way I understand it is that Hamas basically did something in which they intended to turn to sort of just ruin the entire game for everyone. It's if you are going to forget us now, I know Hamas again, and I'm not an expert on Hamas, but what my understanding of this organization is that in the past their actions have usually been calculated, and measured. In other words, you could see, so something seems to have gotten out of they've lost control somehow, somewhere. And that's where I really don't know what the full facts are. I've read somewhere that Hamas, or that that Hamas had information that Netanyahu planned to strike against them, so they struck preemptively. Um, who knows? Who knows what the reality are? But it's clear that there was an act of desperation. It's clear to me that there is this uh, uh, a little bit of an air of suicidality, if you will, in this act of desperation. Um, but I mean, regardless, I think that like when we had the whole issue with suicide bombings, I think it's very risky, very dangerous when an organization um, claims that it is a religious organization in some fashion, um, I mean, and then commits acts um, that would send a message that somehow God's law is limitless and that God's law would support uh, atrocities.